Animated movies create worlds from the ground up. Join The Hollywood Reporter as we talk with some of the pioneering directors and producers who are responsible for this year's animated hits.
There we go.
On this episode, we have Dan Scanlon, director, Monsters University, Chris Buck, director of Frozen, Kristine Belson, producer, The Croods, Chris Wedge, director of Epic, and Chris Meledandri, producer of Despicable Me 2. Welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables, Animation. Welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables Animation. My name is Gregg Kilday, and joining me today is my colleague, Carolyn Giardina. Our guests today include some of the filmmakers behind some of the year's best and most successful animated movies. Joining us today are first Dan Scanlon, director, Monsters University. Next to him is Kristine Belson, producer of The Croods. Next we have Chris Wedge, director of Epic, Chris Meledandri, producer of Despicable Me 2, and Chris Buck, director of Frozen. Let me begin just by throwing this out. I mean, animated movies have progressed so much in technique and in the worlds they show us. Do you folks all feel under enormous pressure to keep topping yourself? Chris, I should ask you.
I don't think we approach it from the standpoint of topping ourselves. I think that that every time we set out to make a new film, we're trying to move into storytelling terrain that is distinctly different from where we've been prior. And that's even a challenge with a sequel, so that you really set out to endeavor not to simply capture what you've already captured. You have to honor what you know the audience loves, which is usually what the filmmaking team loves about the film, but then really, push into new terrain in terms of character and story.
And also technique, it seems. I mean, as we watch these stories, Chris over here directed Frozen. I mean, you had to come up with new software for the snow in the film.
Well, a lot of times it's what we try to do is create kind of a believable world, not necessarily a realistic world. And so when we do our tests, we did the first test we did on the snow. Everyone was not crazy about it. It looked like packing peanuts, that styrofoam look. And so go back to the drawing board and create new software. The team is amazing. They're the guys that they really push themselves. We might ask for a certain look, and they're the ones that keep pushing and pushing it till it looks amazing. I love going in there and seeing the new kind of technology they've got and the new look, and it's always kind of a treat to see what they come up with.
Olaf, did Elsa build you?
Yeah, why?
Do you know where she is?
Yeah, why?
Do you think you could show us the way?
Yeah, why?
How does this work? Ow!
Stop it, Sven. Try and focus here. Yeah, why?
I'll tell you why. We need Elsa to bring back summer.
Summer? Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know why, but I've always loved the idea of summer and sun and all things hot.
Really? I'm guessing you don't have much experience with heat.
Nope.
Chris, for Epic, did your company develop any new software to render the forest or anything like that?
We've been doing animation at Blue Sky for about 26 years, and all the technology we use is technology we developed there. So every movie advances it a little bit. There's a little evolution between every one, and each project helps evolve a certain aspect of the technology. So for us, there are a lot of things that you can't see, but contribute to the feeling that I wanted. For instance, I could tell you that I wanted the characters to be much more articulated than we've normally done. Epic doesn't look as cartoony as the films we've done before it, and so there were more things to move on the characters, and so there was technology developed to make the rigs lighter, which means it made the little puppets that the animators move frame at a time interact faster for them. That just gave them control over nuance, and that's what we were looking for more than anything else.
Dad, I had the most messed up dream. There were talking slugs and tiny little soldiers and...
Hello!
Aw, man.
Chris, when Gregg's talking about snow and ice, I recently was flipping the channels and saw our first film together, Ice Age, playing on television. And to your point, Gregg, I remember that when you used to show me the environments on Ice Age as they were being rendered, and I thought it was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Now I look back at the film and I go, what was it that was so cool about that?
It's a point in time.
Did you have that same experience?
Well, you know, on Ice Age, we didn't know if we could make a film. It was our first feature film, and we had this much money and this much time, and we went in like kids. We did what we could. We put on a show, and part of that was to design. People would say, well, it's white, right? It's white. Well, no. I don't know if you remember, we did all sorts of color studies so that every sequence had its own version of color. So, you know, what you do when you don't have the tools, and we knew we couldn't move the camera.
Right.
We couldn't re-render the backgrounds. Right. You design, and you throw in as much as you can into the ideas, and then, you know, let the technology and technique take it as far as you can.
What I hear, sorry to interrupt, what I hear you guys saying, I would echo too, which is, I don't feel pressure about all the new tools, but we're just so excited to use the new and improved tools. And I think for me, in particular, what's blown me away since I entered the animation field is animation itself and the acting, which I just can't, the bar just keeps getting higher and higher in terms of the facial performance, and to me, that's incredibly exciting.
Kristine, do you learn from each other's films? I mean, when you see a competitor's film, do you want to know how did they do that?
Absolutely, yeah, we do. Yeah, we look at all these films and we're like, darn, we want to do that. Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about the voice actors. You all have some terrific performances in your films. How do you select them? How do you work with them?
I think, well, not to speak for, but I think for us, we usually start with the character on the page first. We don't really have an actor in mind. We really try to develop who that character is, and then maybe even start designing the look of the character all before we've found an actor. And then a lot of times we're literally listening to that actor performing from another film, and then we'll project the character up on the wall, and you can kind of tell when the voice literally clicks into the body, where there's just this moment of, wow, that voice is in that body. And it's not just the physical look, it's also the character. This person embodies that character. This person can add something to that character. And I know, I'm sure for a lot of us, spontaneity is a tough thing to get in animation, and one of the greatest things about working with the actors is one of those few moments where you can really in the moment change something or improvise something or find some little gem that you might not have thought of, and then it really gives the animator something to build off of, and all trying to create the illusion that these movies just happen instantly.
Right. I mean, with Monsters, you knew you would have John Goodman and Billy Crystal, but what were some of the other castings that kind of surprised you as you discovered them?
I think, I mean, Helen Mirren plays the Dean Hardscrabble in the film, and we really wanted to, as you were saying about a sequel, open up the world and see things we hadn't seen, and we hadn't seen a great female scare yet in this world, and we just thought Helen would be the perfect teacher, the perfect teacher who everyone respects but also fears, but is also kind of witty and terrifying. And so she was really a joy, and she sat down with me on the first day and tried all different types of takes on the characters, all different types of accents, and I'm terrified at first to even meet her, and then to have her be that open to it and open to the process and into animation and game for trying different stuff. And then when we were done, she said, well, if none of it's any good, I'm available on Thursday to do it again. What? Really? I'm barely available on Thursday. How could you?
I know.
Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
Do you want audiences to recognize the famous name behind the voice of a character?
The name, not the voice.
Explain.
Well, the name works to market the movie, but the voice, it's your character. So the best actors are the ones that are contributing to a character. You know, in a live-action movie, people walk on. I don't know how this works this way, but, you know, Brad Pitt can be in 3 movies this year, and we love every one of them, and we buy that character he's playing. We can't take an animated character and stick it in another movie. We just can't. They come from too many different places. So the writing and the design and the animation and the voice is just part of it. And so the best actors understand that they're contributing to something. And I think, I don't know about you, but for me as an audience member, I love watching an animated movie, just being lost in the character and not thinking about who it is, not recognizing who it is. And then you read the credits, oh, of course, of course.
Right, the thing that made me happiest on the Croods was we cast Nick Cage as the father, and he was the only casting that we wanted for that role, so luckily he said yes. But it always made me happy when I would read reviews and people would say, I started to forget after about 5 minutes that it was Nick Cage, because, you know, a lot of people already have a lot of opinions about him. So again, I like it when, as you say, that disappears pretty quickly and you can just get lost in the character.
Yeah, we made a decision fairly early on in the evolution of Despicable Me with Steve Carell to embrace him as a creative partner in building the character of Gru. And his instinct was to do the character with an accent, which immediately meant that nobody seeing the film would recognize his voice because it doesn't sound anything like Steve Carell. But what we found was that throughout the process of making the film, that his contributions during the recording sessions were continually bringing us to new discoveries. And those new discoveries then would be fed back to the writers, be fed back to the artists. And it was really a process that just kind of built on itself. That's one of the wonderful parts of this process is, you know, watching, in my case, our directors, Chris Renaud and Pierre Coffin, work with the actors through that evolution and see it grow through production.
I've been recruited by a top secret agency to save the world. That is all. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, baby! Crew's back in the game with gadgets and weapons and cool cars, the whole deal.
Awesome! Are you really gonna save the world?
Yes, I am.
Chris, you were nodding. Do you want to talk maybe about how you developed your villain with Christoph Waltz?
Well, yeah, we didn't exactly cast against type with Christoph Waltz for our villain. My notion for this character, I just wanted to get this deep, dark, under the shadows kind of character to come out, and that was as easy as showing it to Christoph and having him say, I'll do it, I love it, I'll do it. Chris and Dan have been talking about something that's very important in animation, because everything you see on the screen is something that we made up. We can't take the camera outside and watch the cars or the clouds or the houses or whatever. It's all in your head, so you spend years thinking about how this thing will be. And you expect everything, you can either try to make everything fit that, or you can embrace your hundreds of collaborators, from actors, designers, animators, editors, producers, and let everybody contribute what they can, and just try to keep it all contained and let it breathe. And that's where we find the spontaneity, that's where we find the moments, oh, I never would have thought of that, that's so much better. And then once more and more of the movie is up on the screen, then everybody starts to feel something that you never could have predicted. One of my favorite lines was when we were working on the robots. And one of our, we had been working for years, and there came a moment where we projected like 3 shots from the final film. And everybody just oohed and ahed, and oh, this is gonna be great, this is gonna be great, now we all get it. One of the seasoned story artists came up to me and he said, this is where the film gets bigger than the people that made it. And that just made me feel like, wow, yeah, all we have to do is just kind of help this thing.
The story starts to like tell itself at a certain point. And it's so great when you get to that point, because before that point it's kind of torturous, you know? You're still trying to find it, and then it just hits and
And plus, it's not up to you anymore.
Yeah, it's like your kid has grown up and gone to college. You just kind of like, all right, I've done everything I could to instill this in you, and good luck. And
It's like, without question, I think one of the truly great privileges of working in this medium is the extraordinary talent, both the breadth of talent across a crew and the depth of talent. And as Chris was describing, you know, you have this unusually collaborative process, which, you know, these guys as directors and, you know, and our directors managed to synthesize this massive amount of input that's coming through so that it comes out as a singular expression. But when you stop to think and you look back over the course of a movie and you go, where did all these contributions come from? Frequently, you know, you can look across a wide spectrum of people on your team and go, well, that was from that animator, and that was from that storyboard artist, and that designer, and that TD, and, you know, and it's I don't think there's anything quite like this.
But then it also becomes, you're saying, specific artists that you can point to who did what, and I can't even tell you anymore, because it becomes that one person said one thing, and then the next one added to it and made it even better. Then the next person added something to it. So it's always, it's amazingly collaborative, amazingly frustrating, because you have so many opinions, and then, but it's also sort of magic that it comes together in the end.
Let me ask a little bit about the development and production process, because in live action film, a script gets developed. At a certain point, the studio gives them what's called a green light. They put a crew together and they go out and shoot the movie. I've never quite understood if there is a green light in animation, or when a project,
I was going to say,
when a
please,
project becomes a go movie.
Can I tell you something? Chris and I don't know what movie we were working on, but I said, when are they going to give us a green light on this thing? And he said, you're working on the movie. What do you need a green light for? You're making the movie.
I just want to hear the word. You want to go to that green light meeting.
Although we call that a rolling green light, that it just sort of evolves. But the other thing, though, on our first movie, on Ice Age, because Chris was focused on this notion of this mythical green light, and he was waiting for the green light and waiting for the green light. And I could tell he really wanted a green light. So I remember on one of my trips back to Blue Sky, he said, okay, now we're really making the film, right? Everything's going ahead, everything, and I said, yes. He said, okay, well, we're going to have a little meeting, and we're going to have a little ceremony. And so he had taken a lamp and he had put some green cellophane around the bulb, and then did the actual lighting of the green light ceremony, which I'll never forget, because there was something about that moment where people cheered. They did cheer. I've never been able to recapture that moment again, but it was great.
Tell us, when did you know you were actually making monsters?
Yeah, I mean, I think to you guys' point, once you just start making it, there kind of is no real moment. I mean, I guess when it's done and it's out in the theaters, you can sort of sigh a breath of relief and realize that it's out there. But yeah, I mean, I think for us with Monsters, we talked about, we love those characters. We talked about the concept of doing another film, and we got together as a group to talk about what that movie might be. But with the thought in mind, if we can't think of a great story, we won't do it. We're not just going to make this sequel to make it. We really wanted to make sure that we were really behind something. So I guess it was more of just a creative green light amongst all of us, and I think that was when we sort of found the heart of the film. You find kind of the fun and the potential of the world, but then I think when you find the heart that you can all get behind, the thing that is sort of the point of making a movie, the thing you want the audience to walk away from. And I think when we realized we wanted to make a film about a character that didn't get everything that they wanted, who worked hard and never gave up and still didn't quite get what they wanted, we felt like that's something we'd never seen before. And I think for that was kind of our creative green light of like, okay, this whole process is going to be hard, and as you said, the story is going to be terrible for years, and it won't be till that very end that it all starts to work out. But if we know why we're doing it, then we'll just keep going.
I want to piggyback on what you're saying, and that's the thing that coming from live action I found so amazing about the animation process is you can get started on a script that's very, very good, but it's not going to be great until you've screened it. You know, our animation process allows you to see the film many times before you're done. It's sort of like workshopping a play, and I found that to be the most exhilarating thing coming from live action, where I've been on a set and had our shooting schedule and we're running over and you got to move on and you can never get that day back. And in animation, the fact that you can watch the entire film many times over and say, well, okay, you know what, Act 1's in good shape, but now we really need to attend to Act 2 and deliver on that emotion or comedy, it's remarkable. And it's why I think animated movies feel like these gems when they're done, because you have that opportunity to keep going back. It's a gift and a luxury you don't have in live action. It's amazing.
I always say it's like Groundhog Day, the movie, where it's like, look, I may not be the best director or writer or whatever, but I can just keep trying. You know, we can just keep doing it over and over again, and we can just keep knocking away at it. And I think you're right. I think there is something really special to animation in that way.
Of course, the flip side of the coin for you directors is not to lose your way in that very long process.
Yes.
That goes back to what someone was saying about so many opinions, so much collaboration, and still having that singular vision that can sort of guide you through all those twists and turns.
No, Chris, you had your release date moved up, though.
We did,
How did that impact your process?
Well, I'd been on it for a while already and pitching it, and when they said, I'm going to move you guys up, Peter Delvecco, the producer, was in the room with, as we were told this, and Peter said, there's no way. And I went, oh no, we're going to do it. Because I was like, I was done. I'm like, I could see the finish line, and they, you know, it was like, oh my gosh, we can do it, we can do it, we can do it. My energy and momentum was, and maybe naivety too, is like, let's just do it. We can do it, you know, we've got to. I was ready. I was ready to make the movie, you guys all know this too, it's like, and to just dig in and get it done.
It's funny, like gas fills a space, like you're always doing everything you can to make the movie as good as possible. So we always laugh about it because these things are like a marathon, but you run them at like a sprinter's pace.
Everyone says it's going to be a marathon. No, it's a sprint for 26.2 miles. It just is.
I don't know what a marathon is. I don't know. None of us run.
It's long and it's hard.
Yes, that's what we know.
Right. And sometimes people go, oh, and producing animation's easier, right? That's why you like it. And I always think, okay, you have not worked in animation, clearly. It's very arduous.
Now, one thing that's interesting, Chris, we were talking about, you screen test the audience, you screen test the movie before audiences. How are you able to do that in animation? Are you able to go back in and make changes from what you learn from the audience?
We built into our schedule the assumption that once we start previewing the film, that we're going to be making a certain, certain percentage of changes, and that's all built in, and we'll do an average of probably 3 previews through the course of the second half of production, and I always find that my directors and I, we dread these previews. It's like I don't think there's any part of the process that makes me any more nervous than sort of the lead up to a preview. I mean, opening the film to me is a piece of cake compared to the previews. And yet, when you go through the preview, it is inevitably an incredibly helpful process. Not so much because of the hard data that you get, but simply because you can listen to the audience watch the movie. And there's so much that you can learn, about pacing, about, confusions, about, where something perhaps needs to be pulled back or pushed forward, and it's not scientific at all. But coming out of it, I'd say with almost no exception, they always prove to be very beneficial to the process. As long as you don't start trying to make changes based on the specific data, and that's when you can unravel your movie completely.
Sometimes it works, though. I mean, there's some science to it, and I'll cite Ice Age, because when we went in to make Ice Age, when we first previewed it, we had maybe 60% of the animation done. So you're always going to get those cards. Yeah. You know, what's your favorite movie? The funny, this guy. What's your least favorite? The drawings. You know, so okay, that's kind of scientific. But we had an ending on Ice Age where one of the main characters died. Diego died. And in the first screening, you'd get that, what's your favorite? The funny guy. What's your least favorite? When the tiger dies. What's your favorite? The other funny guy. What's your least favorite? When the tiger dies. So I think it was after the second, and then we showed it months after, and then finally it was like, you know what? If there's any chance of having a sequel or like video for this, I only watched Old Yeller once.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, the Old Yeller sequel's not very good.
The sequel's no good at all. No. It's like... so I mean, there is some science, you know. It just got us. No, but it was also a nudge that just helped us think. You know what? I thought it was cool that this guy that we got all the way and then we let him go. But maybe, you know, it could be just as rewarding to come up with a way to keep him alive.
Well, let's talk about sequels for a moment. I mean, first of all, those of you who worked this year on original material, how much in the back of your head is the idea of let's leave room for a sequel as we're finishing this movie?
I can say for us, not at all. We just wanted to get one movie made, and we were so pleased to have finished it. So it's exciting now. Chris and Kirk are off working on a sequel, but we honestly didn't think about it one bit. We just wanted to get them to the end of the first journey in a satisfying way.
Oh, that's the same thing. On Epic, it was just to get the story. I mean, the challenge on Epic was to make a film that felt different than what you'd seen before. I mean, the evolution, when we talk about the evolution of animation, it was just that I wanted to do something that stood for that, you know, a different direction. And that was just getting the movie done is what that was about. It was the same thing on Ice Age. We never talked about anything after the first one. It was about the movie, getting the movie right.
I think these movies are so complicated and so hard to do. You joke about a sequel. The crew jokes about it. Of course, they're always horrible ideas, and they're just, you know, it's nothing real, but it's always fun just to blow off steam. But no, we never did on Frozen. There's just, there's too much.
You would dread the sequel.
Yeah, you're like I can't think about a sequel. I got to get through this one, you know. So that's
they go through a time tunnel and they end up in New York at the Macy's parade.
I mean, look. Having said all that, I think all of us, obviously, our goal is to make films that have appealing characters and speak universal truths to audiences. And if you do that, and then you don't kill everybody at the end of the movie, theoretically, you can go on to make a second one.
When you do start to approach a sequel, are there ideas that you left on the table when you were making the first one that you bring back, or do you find that you're really starting with a fresh?
I think it's different for different films. I mean, I remember when Chris and I were working on the sequel to Ice Age. We didn't have a backlog of ideas. You know, we maybe had one or two, but we were really searching for where we would go with that movie and that story. But what we found on Despicable Me was that the story of these characters had just begun. Once we started down a path of exploring what life after villainy would be for this, kind of curmudgeonly guy, Gru, and asked ourselves the question about, whether or not he could ever fall in love. The story started to tell itself.
Chances are also there are a few sequences on the editing room floor that you could start with. Things that you put a lot of time into and just never worked out, but are kind of cool ideas on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Toy Story films, I think they did a lot of that. Lotso, Hug and Bear kind of came out of very early versions of the story, and I wasn't there for the second film, but I know a lot of it was pulled out. With MU, it was less of that and more because we were going back in time. We had this sort of new challenge of having to recreate the characters, and you still want them to be familiar and to be Mike and Sully, and the Mike and Sully you knew and loved, but we were also different 10, 15 years ago, and it allowed us to rewrite them and make them slightly different so that we could watch them turn each other into the guys we love. And but I think, and I'm sure we would all agree with the sequels too, you are making a new movie. You are making an original film. We want to strike certain things that people liked about the first film, but you don't want to retread what you've already done. And so it really is a challenge. You're telling a whole new story with these characters and kind of sending them on a new journey. And I would never say one is harder than the other, but like you said, a lot of people would sometimes say, oh, it's a sequel, must be easy to make. Everything's already done.
You haven't made a sequel.
No, I mean, we literally have to remake everything too because the technology changes. Right. But beyond that, we have to tell a whole new story with characters who were designed to tell this other story.
I think your challenge is, we have our own challenges creating the new stuff, and you have you're creating a new world, but I think a sequel has the challenges as far as I can see. You still have this world you've created, this sort of box that you have to live in.
Yeah.
You have to create a new story and punch out of it, but you still have this own
I always
world
feel like
that
it's like
you've
somebody
created.
took chess and said, see, chess, isn't this a great game? Could you use these pieces and they still move the same way but come up with a new game? It's like, okay. But yeah, I think they all have their own challenges. A sequel, an original film, just in different ways.
Briefly for us on the Croods, like on Frozen, we knew we were starting a bunch of scared cavemen and ending with this ultimate father sacrifice, but it took us forever to land Act 2. It was a lot of trial and error. And so we wound up actually with quite a big backlog of ideas. Not story ideas that you could hang a whole movie on, but a lot of gags, which I'm hoping that Chris and Kirk will work into the sequel.
The only part of doing the sequel that you don't get to do is the development, the years of developing the first picture and getting those characters on their feet and just figuring out, depending on what you start. I mean, maybe you started with a story, you got a head start. But for me, a lot of times, it's that you start with a notion of a world. This would be a cool place to go. So, okay, well, then what happens there? You kind of reverse engineer a story in, and then the story would have this character and this character and this character, and you reverse them into the story. And so you kind of arrive at this cast and this situation and this look and this place that takes years sometimes. So there is at least, different work.
I think one of the themes that I'm hearing, which is, I think why this whole medium has been so vibrant now for so long, is because all of us and are all endeavoring to make each film that we work on distinctive and trying to push into new terrain. You spend so much time, you have so many people spending so much time on each of these films that you really have to ask yourself, why are they worthy? Why is it that what is it, what's worthy about what it is that you're working on, that you can actually go and ask hundreds of people to dedicate years of their life? And one of the constant sort of themes that I'm hearing, whether it's through technology or it's through storytelling or through character development, is that I think, Chris talked about it with Epic, that all of us are intent upon creating a new experience for the filmmaking team in making it, so people can really feel engaged and excited and passionate about what they're doing, and for the audience when they come to the theater to see it. And I think that goes for whether it's a sequel or it's a first film or it's an adaptation of something. That seems to be a constant theme. I look back at the list of animated films that have been made in the last 18 years, and it's an extraordinary feeling because so many of them are so good. And I think it's because of the kinds of things that you're hearing from this group today.
Chris, that's interesting you say that, but you also warned at the VS Summit this summer that Hollywood was turning out too many animated movies right now, and they ran the risk of cannibalizing each other.
Well, I do think that's true. I think that I think we have to be. I think we're carrying all of us are carrying a legacy that needs to be protected, and that is a legacy of quality. I think all of us know that when faced with trying to do too much of any one thing, that there can be a degradation or a dilution of that quality, and it is important for the overall health of the industry that going to an animated film continues to be something that is special, and I think looking backwards, it has been. And I think all of us need to be cautious about, how much production we put out there. The optimist in me says, well, you know what? If I look at these films, I can look at any one of the films represented here today, and I can say, as long as we continue as an industry to keep the bar high and to continue to raise the bar, then the issue of the number of films becomes less important.
There's another remedy for that. The issue about, that perception of what animation is.
Exactly.
And if it's all tent poles, then yeah, we're all going to have toothaches, and just trying to top each other in something that people consider an animation genre is, I think, it's a perspective more than anything. And if we can take more risks and make other kinds of films, fairy tales worked great for a while, musicals worked great for a while. Currently, comedies are working great. In Epic, we tried to do an action adventure movie, and there are other. Animation can be more than the thing that the audience today expects it to be. And some of this may come about by either taking more risks and, assuming the audience will come along. Some of them will come about by bringing our production costs down and being able to make lower budget movies, more genre movies, knowing you're making a movie for a smaller audience.
Right. In different genres, so that animation's not a genre, but just a medium.
Animation's not a genre. It is a way to make movies.
As the lines get more and more blurred anyway between live action and animation, maybe that really will happen.
And that's happening.
Yeah, I believe in that future too, and hope it gets here sooner rather than later.
Well, I think in some respects it is here now. I do think Epic was a genre departure. I think that when we made Despicable Me, the idea of making a movie, an animated movie about a protagonist who's a classic antagonist, was met with great skepticism. It defied your perception of what an animated, hero of a film should be. I think that I see already that we're pushing at the boundaries of, as you say, genre definition.
Seth Rogen's going to make a lower budget animated movie. All my teenagers are going to go see that, and it's going to change and expand their perception of what the movie
I hope it's good.
I do too.
When you folks watch Gravity this year, in your minds, is that an animated movie?
Yes. I think it's, we actually were recording Sandy Bullock today for an animated film, and as you listen to her describe the process of making the movie, you could call it a mixed media film, but it's more animation than live action.
Well, that means there'll be more competition for the animation Oscar if other people adopt that thought.
Well, my hope is that that animated films can be considered for the Oscar and can break out of just, and we've seen this in the past. Pixar has certainly demonstrated this in the past, but I think that's a trend that I'd like, because people mischaracterize who's coming to see our films. With Despicable Me, our film, our audience, people still want to say, well, it's kind of a family film. But if you look at who comes to see our films, our audience is, half family and half non-family. We make our movies for for an audience. Most of us, I think, make movies for audiences that resemble the people who are making the movies. You know, we're not specifically making the movies for a family audience. So this kind of this tendency to characterize animation, it's great that we have, you know, that we have our own, you know, kind of category. That's fantastic. But I'd like to see, you know, the industry perception broaden and have animation move more into some other categories as well.
But it is, I mean, Gravity is an example. Life of Pi was an example. You can't make these movies any other way. And I mean, when you take people's places, where do you go to the movies? You want to be immersed in a world that you don't have any other access to. And those are great examples of places you can go no other way. That kind of immersion is it's what animation does well. And for me, it's that transportation to another place that, I mean, it doesn't have to be all cartoony necessarily, although we've all, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, maybe there's another way to do it. Maybe that distinguishes, maybe there are some genre lines that blur, but it's got to happen.
I mean, watching both Epic and the Croods, the landscapes in those movies, I wondered if either of you took inspiration from Avatar.
You know, people said a lot that there was one set in particular early on in the movie that people referenced Avatar a lot, and we actually didn't sort of see it ourselves until after we'd made it and went, oh, right, that does bear resemblance. You know, for us, just designing that world was so much fun and so daunting because somebody said earlier, you know, in these animated movies, you have to create every single blade of grass. Like, you don't get anything for free. And for us, we were like, well, what would a prehistoric blade of grass look like? And particularly, you know, our prehistoric blade of grass. So it was a lot of work and a lot of decision making. And we wound up going with a sort of stylized design, but these ultra realistic surfacing, which I was a huge fan of the surfacing in our movie. I just thought it was beautiful. And that, I thought, created a really interesting effect. But we didn't see the similarities till Avatar till afterwards, but we were perfectly pleased with those comparisons. We didn't have a problem with that.
Let's talk about costs a little bit. Software prices coming down, but the level of the quality that you're doing keeps going up. How is all of this impacting the final project?
I mean, you have to make your decisions about, there's a business behind all this, obviously. You have to make all your decisions about what you're going to spend and what you think you're going to make at the end of the day. Fortunately for us, all that is true. Not only do the cost of the equipment come down and cost of licensing software come down, but also those things that you're paying for are much more sophisticated. The computers are 10 times faster than the last time you bought a computer, and the software is more fantastic than it was. So we are still, I mean, that's one advantage that animation's always been a technical medium. You can't have animation without technology. But the advantage of adding computers into the mix is just, it's going to just keep going this way. I mean, who's going to stop it? The technology, like every year it gets better, the computers get faster and cheaper.
Is 3D entrenched now as part of the process for a mainstream studio animated film?
I'd say so if the audience keeps coming. I mean, we got a bit substantial percentage of the box office is 3D, and as filmmakers, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but there's no better way to watch a movie, in my mind, than IMAX 3D. It just makes it more like this, you know, more like where we're sitting. And so you have that extra, it's actually that degree of cinematography and immersion that the 3D gives you. It's another element in composition that's just fun.
It's so cool, and it's not just the like in your face 3D, but I just love the depth, like the way you could feel like you were actually inside that set because it really felt like it extended back further.
At what point in pre-production or production do you start thinking about the 3D and how you're going to use it to forward your story?
Right away.
These days.
It's a mistake. That's the 3D that usually isn't satisfying in theaters when it was sort of an afterthought. Like, you want to be thinking about it from early on.
Yeah, and it's not about, like you're saying, it's not about the shots, the in-your-face kind of shots that that are in there. You know, we have those, but it's more about the immersive world and how you can kind of be subtle about it, but take the audience, and you guys have been saying it too, about take them to a different place. And now we not only take them there, but we can put them there, you know, which I just think is so exciting.
Again, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I've always felt technology is our friend. I've been into this since it started, and you know, if the technology can do something, you can do anything within it. So it doesn't mean you have to make stuff that looks slick. But this Atmos thing, the sound, you know, so there have been rules in taking your dialogue or your music and your effects and what you can do when. And so you're always making little holes for the dialogue in a big action sequence, or you're talking with the sound designers. Okay, here's where this is going to be mostly music, and then we can have some effects. But we got to hear this dialogue, so we're going to have to make a hole. The composer will do something. This Atmos thing. There's so many speakers in the theater, and I encourage the audience to go see this if they're interested. That you can do everything at once, and you can hear it all. Everything's just discrete, so you could be, the music is kind of floating around your ears, and the effects are coming from wherever you want them to be, and the dialogue's coming from. It was really miraculous.
How much time does it add to mixing the movie?
We did our home mix for like months, and then they spent about a week separating it into.
But now, I mean, we did our mix in Atmos, so now I don't think it really adds too much more to the process.
Yeah, we did ours in Atmos too.
You did the whole thing?
Yeah, it just
that's a lot to keep track of
during that time, during the same time as the mix.
Let me ask, we have to wrap up shortly, but when you're talking to students these days, someone who's like fascinated by animation, what should they study? Drawing, computers?
All of it.
What do you tell them?
I always, because I taught at CalArts for quite a few years, and I don't think it's changed. At least the technology has changed, yes, but learn the computer, draw, whatever. But really, I always said, just be a student of life. You know, just observe everyone, animals, anything, the environment, and bring that to your work. Because I think there were a lot of students, and I was guilty of it too, that only studied animated films when we started on. That was, you know, we were so focused on this and forgot that the rest of the world, and being a student of life and bringing that all into what we do. And that's what, as directors and producers, we take everything out there and sort of, you know, it's even hard to explain, but we're just sponges, you know, and we take it and we put it into our work and we give it to other people. So, you know, besides the drawing and that technology, just be a student of life, really.
One specific area that I think is interesting for young, aspiring animation filmmakers to focus on is storyboarding. And because I think that there is a shortage of well-trained storyboard artists. And we've been also encouraging, you know, some of the film schools like CalArts to actually spend more time in helping to develop artists as storyboard artists. So I think it's one area where you've got, you know, because as Chris said, study everything and studying life, that's the best advice that one can give. But I think if you're looking for like a specific area where there tends to be a shortage, and you have to be really clever about how you go about getting that training, but that's one area that I would direct people towards.
I'd agree with that too, because they're always in demand, the story artists are.
If they want to be a story artist, but it's also where you tend to find your future animation directors. They come from story, and that's because they can draw for a camera, and they can tell a story. The technology, the one thing I would say, the one trap I would encourage people not to fall into is to learn some, you know, animation technology and make that your thing, that you know the technology, because then you're only going to be somebody that knows technology, and the technology changes.
I was going to say, and it's going to change in 3 years anyway, so.
Well, all right. Thank you for joining us today. Obviously, one thing I'd recommend is they see all the films represented here today, because there really is some amazing work represented. So once again, thank you for joining us. We've had Dan Scanlon here, Kristine Belson, and our three Chris's today, Chris Wedge, Chris Meledandri, and Chris Buck. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was fun.
To learn more about the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables, visit thr.com.